So I was thinking about my roots and my heritage and that, and I thought, maybe it's time to sit down and learn some Yiddish. Yiddish is broadly a language of the Ashkenazi Jews, which is closely related to High German, with influence from Hebrew and Aramaic and in most dialects the Slavic languages, to spice it up a bit. It was spoken all over this region of Europe, and had 13 million speakers before the Second World War. After the Second World War, it wasn't spoken there so much. For socio-political reasons, it continued to decline, and now there are only an estimated 500,000 Yiddish native speakers. Now, I'm not one of those heritage nuts, I'm not here to sell you an ancestors.net test or anything, but I still think there's a value in carrying on some parts of a culture, even if it's just in the language. The thing is, language is just such a massive part of who we are, and I felt I could attain some connection to my ancestry through studying their native tongue. Yeah, I did what any sensible person does. I started the Duolingo course. The Duolingo course is based on the dialect of Yiddish spoken in Hungary, a variety of Polish, and it has nearly 300,000 learners, ostensibly. It is also, apparently, not in beta development. Well, special thanks to these 5 and the world's least gay online linguist for making this fever dream of a language course and teaching me how to place the perfect order for a bagel. But before we get into that, I need to get something off my chest. As some of you will know, I love writing my fantasy work, but recently I was in a bit of a down phase for my writing, so I was looking for a bit of a different approach to rejuvenate my mind. And I am so happy I found the creative essay writing Explore the Personal and Powerful Learning Path from today's sponsor, Skillshare. With a learning path, all the relevant resources are curated and structured so you never have to spend time searching, and you can easily stay motivated as your progress is charted from beginner through to advanced classes. And with Skillshare being the largest online community for creatives, help is easy to come by. Would you like to improve in a hobby, develop a skill that will help you in the workplace, or find a new passion? You too can find a relevant class on photography, music, cooking, business, and more, all on Skillshare. And if you're one of the first 500 people to join using my link in the description box, you'll receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Remember, you can always cancel if it's not your thing, but you might just find the key to achieving your creative goals. Thank you to Skillshare for making this video possible. After sitting through the first lesson's obsession with bears being mistaken for balloons, I thought I was doing pretty well all in all. That's when the challenge hit. The first writing task. I had to write in Yiddish to answer the question. Well, I could have answered with the word bank, but there's one big problem with the word bank on Duolingo, and that's that it's for complete bozos and I would never be able to look my family in the eyes again if I used it. Now, see, Yiddish does not typically use the Latin alphabet. It is usually written with an adapted form of the Hebrew script, which means if I don't want to copy and paste every character one at a time, I'm going to need to use a different keyboard. Simple enough, really. Open settings, go to language settings, get a new language and make it Yiddish, and there you go. Keyboard is ready for downloading. Click there and problem solved. Then I try to type the first letter of the sentence I had been given. The word is the Yiddish equivalent of a, which is just a. So that would be an aleph with a pasech. Where is it? I pull up a Yiddish keyboard graphic. I can't see it anywhere, so I look it up specifically. Turns out on this keyboard you need to type aleph, then hit caps lock, hold shift, and tap 7 before turning caps lock off again to type the next letter. And that's how you type the equivalent of the letter A. The thing is, at least on Windows, when you want to type Yiddish, it gives you a Hebrew keyboard. Now this doesn't sound so bad. Yiddish is written with an adapted Hebrew script, but see, there's the key word, adapted. The Hebrew script as used in modern Hebrew is what's known as an impure abjad. A true abjad, like the older forms of the Phoenician script, only writes its consonants, and leaves vowels implicit, to be guessed by context. Most modern abjads are impure, in that they do represent some vowels by using consonant letters to show a vowel, like yod, which is originally used to show y, being used for its vocalic equivalent e in some contexts. Hebrew also has a system of nikud, diacritics added to consonants to show the reader what vowel follows them. But these are generally only used in things like learning materials, dictionaries, and some poetry. Yiddish takes things to the next level, with its orthography no longer being an abjad at all. It writes all its vowels with dedicated letters in a special system called an alphabet. The letter I was trying to type earlier is pasech aleph, used for the A sound. Though it's not a letter, the character does exist in Hebrew as well. The aleph is a letter of the Hebrew abjad, and the pasech, called patach in Hebrew, is a nikud vowel sign. But see, combining these two would not be something you'd have to do very often in your average Hebrew typing session, especially considering nikud isn't used very often to begin with. That's why it's possible to type it on a Hebrew keyboard, but it hasn't exactly been optimized. That being said, it is ridiculous that the Hebrew keyboard insists on making it this hard to type nikud. Along with kometz aleph, used for o, and pasech zwei Juden, used for I, pasech aleph is one of the 3 commonly used nikud letter combinations that have come to represent vowels in Yiddish. There's also some differences in which letters are most used, as Yiddish has several letters that it only uses in words of Semitic origin, mainly loanwords from Hebrew, so things end up being unnecessarily awkward to type because the Yiddish keyboard as offered by Windows simply hasn't been adapted to suit the language's needs. So I downloaded the Microsoft Keyboard Layout Creator and got to work. I started with the Hebrew keyboard and went from there. I hadn't taken a look at the time, but there are some keyboards already around, but these start with the German or English keyboards and replace letters with their approximate equivalents. Especially Isaac L. Bleeman's phonetic keyboard based on English is brilliant, by the way. Link in the description, but I still think my Hebrew-based keyboard should have a place in the discussion. My first draft was essentially the same as the original, with the most important thing being that kometz and pasech aleph were easy enough to type. I set them to Alt and Shift aleph respectively, and added some Yiddish punctuation I felt the Hebrew keyboard was missing. I then told a member of my community, a native Yiddish speaker who has his own channel, link in the description as well, what I was doing. We discussed it a little and decided it would be best to give these their own dedicated keys, just like how A, O, and U with umlauts get their own keys on the German keyboard. So now the Yiddish keyboard looks like this. I've given up these keys to the 2 aleph variations and put a key for fe next to the key for pay. On Ku's request, I made this version with the line above it the standard version. If you want the non-standard alternative without the line, you have to hit the Alt key. This here is final fe, a version of the letter which occurs if it's at the end of a word. Normally, pay doesn't have a final version, but some people do use it, so shift plus final fe will get you that as well. Same goes for the unusual final cough. Actually, wherever possible, shift adds a dot to the character. Alt bet was used to give vet, another one of those characters that's only used in loanwords from Hebrew. On the keyboard I started with, there's shortcuts for double vov and double yud with alt plus vov or yud respectively, and alt plus ches gives vov yud. I kept the first 2 of these as is, but since ches is only used in words of Semitic origin in Yiddish, I replaced it with pasech zwei Juden, and put vov yud on alt plus this key. I also put the choilem, a vowel letter that isn't used in the standard orthography, as the shift alternative, just because it's a letter that some people might want to type. Ches was moved to alt plus kuf. If you need to add diacritics to letters, then the dagesh, pesech, and kometz are available as alt keys to the top right. Alright, there we go. Crew seemed happy enough with this, so here we are. Now I can compile this keyboard, install it, and get back to my Duolingo lesson. Beautiful. So, I mean, simple enough. We just go over to this Yiddish new style keyboard, this keyboard I created, and we obviously switch to the use keyboard because, you know, we're pros, and then we just, you know, type our answer. How the f*** did that still count? What does it take for Duolingo to tell me I'm wrong? I was gonna do a bit here at the end where I was like, aha, you know, I did it, but I got it wrong anyway. But it turns out Duolingo just accepts anything. It will accept anything I type. Like, I've tried this bit like 3 times now, getting like a majority of the letters wrong. Well, half of the 4 letters are just completely wrong. What I wrote there was oner, not aber, but I mean, there couldn't possibly be anything wrong with Yiddish Duolingo, right? I mean, I'm sure it's a perfect course with no issue.